Henderson, you're here today, Winning with Glenn, another segment where we've been discussing rock solid principles, and this is a continuation of indicators and things that you need to know that's telling you it's time for you to cease operations. Because I found, Jim, thank you for joining me again today, that true, so many people, they will stay with something, they will stay with something, and it's telling them you need to quit. The things are telling them you need to quit. Yeah. You need to quit for your own sake. You need to quit for the benefit of your customers, and it's time
your
for
family,
you to, you know,
whatever.
stop.
Right.
As one person says, stop the madness.
Welcome to the Win with Glenn video podcast, where Glenn Henderson and special guest will give you the tips, insight, and tools you need to grow, develop your business and career. Go with us as we dive into the best practices and rock-solid principles that will elevate you and bring proven success. Now, here's Glenn Henderson.
We talked about when the business supersedes the personal. We talked about when it begins to, and I had a top 10 list, but we'll see if we can get through them today. And then we also talked about when it begins to affect your relationships and self. What is another main item that you've observed over the years?
Well, we mentioned health for one thing. When things are not going well in a business, you can't sleep, get upset, you'll have medical issues, you'll have things that pop up because your body's not designed.
People really need to.
Right. You know, and how many times have we heard over the years, I wish I just had a job. I wish I could just go back to work.
Right.
Let somebody else worry about it, because I'm up at night worrying about my taxes, and I got to make payroll, and I got vendors and so on. So there is, and I brought that up several times before, it is important.
Well, that's why I mentioned when your life changes, and it will change some.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
But when you begin to see that you're doing things that are really not germane to the business, but you're just having now to avoid or manage, then it's telling you something.
Or cut corners.
And you mentioned counting the costs.
Yeah.
And so I remember in one of our businesses that it was an indicator of my lack of character or my inability for capacity. So the business is telling you that you can't really handle this because you're having to, and that was the third thing that I had here. When you begin to compromise on your values. Right. So you start off and you say, well, I'm going to do this. Here's how we're going to manage the business. And you have you should have a set of core values. We talked about that. Right. But now all of a sudden you're able to compromise on them because
you have
things have changed. That's
you
right.
You got payroll, I got expenses. And if I don't compromise, I'm not going to.
Now let me tell you what exactly happened. So I use the term. I said, what's a close relative or a close friend? And a close friend is somebody who's looking to borrow from you. And a distant friend is somebody.
I am full of close friends.
And a distant friend is somebody who owes you money.
Right.
And so what happens in business is you have all of these friends, right? You could be right, but now something's going on in the business. You have needs. Something's happening, and so you find yourself going to your close friends and relatives and looking to borrow from them. Right. Something that you said you would never do, and it would destroy a relationship. It would destroy your relationship, and so
forever changing.
I can't tell you how many people that get into trouble. They get into trouble with the IRS, and they pick up the phone and they call me and they say, "Well, I was told to call you. I had this epiphany, and you have something." And then there's tension between them and me,
relationship,
and it has nothing to do with me.
It gets broken over and over again, and you're going to regret it the rest of your life because you're not going to be able to fix all that.
Well, this is not my registered statement, but the borrower is servant to the lender. It was said a long time ago, and that's why I'm trying to, in everything that we talk about in these rock solid principles, the one thing that you don't want to do is find yourself borrowing. And invariably, when a person starts to get into trouble, I didn't pay my taxes, or I have to make payroll, and I can show you text messages from last week where someone said, we just had a rough week, and can you loan me money? And I tell them, no, it'll destroy. But when you find yourself. And that's what we talked about in the things that you need to have in place. When you find yourself the trends, and the trend is typically 3 months. When you find yourself seeing a trend where you have to cost, you're not making payroll.
Right.
There's always a deficit. You're
Stretching,
starting to,
stretch.
what's the term? The writing's on the wall.
Yeah.
You need to be looking at the writing on the wall. And here's another thing. It was not here. That's why I said I was going to have this top 10. What gets in the way of people? And I'm going to tell you what got in my way. It was a character trait. What gets in the way of people? The indicators are saying, listen, you need to stop doing this. It's not working.
Exit.
And it's not, well, because I'm cut out of the cloth, never say no, never quit. It's even on my wall.
Keep pushing.
Never quit. Who said that? Church, was it Churchill? Never give up?
Somebody.
It was somebody. But never give up. And so I'm cut from that cloth. But there was an indicator telling me, Glenn, I had all these indicators. You got vendors calling you. You're avoiding phone calls.
Right.
You don't have enough money to make payroll. You're going into your bank accounts, which you shouldn't be doing, and that's another rock solid principle we'll talk about. You're sole proprietor. You need money, and instead of being on payroll, you're just going into the bank account. You have to pay this person, but instead you're paying yourself.
Rob one to pay the other one.
So I had all of these indicators saying this is not working. Forget why. It's not working. And what kept me from ceasing operations? Ego. I didn't want people to see me as a so-called failure.
Right.
And so I stayed in the business failing, and then I failed more and more. I became more of a deceiver, more of a liar, more in debt, because I didn't want my peers to see me going down the toilet, going down a drain.
Well, it goes back to the issue of pride.
Right.
The pride of life. I don't want to be perceived as someone who couldn't make it.
Right.
Because in our culture, you got to make it. You got to be the hero. You got to be that person.
It was a weight lifted off of my shoulders when I ceased operations. I said this was
emotionally, spiritually, relationally.
I could physically feel it when, and I want to talk about bankruptcy before we're done here on the list. But there's another indicator. If you're no longer enjoying what you're doing, I know people say, well, the day that you find something you love will be the last day you go to work. No, the day that you find something you love,
you will be going to work.
You're going to be working harder.
I'm testament to that. I'm going to tell you.
No,
I remember when
find your passion.
When we started the Institute, and you were there, and your wife were there, and I went from working, an average of 60 hours a week to 100 hours a week.
Right.
And flying every week. I was flying 4 to 6 times a week. Never saw my wife, never saw my kids, started missing ball games, started missing activities. And this business we started was all intended to free me up so I could write more, teach more, do the things that I love more. But now I've got to pay people. I've got to keep up, with the suppliers. I have to deal with my clients. I have any personal time.
Right.
I quit fishing with my son. I quit hanging out with my daughter. Quit taking my wife to dinner.
Baby, me.
Yeah. I'm feeding this thing over and over, and I think that's where the joy started to go out of it, and it became worse than a job. And then what you said, I didn't have a way to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would be on an airplane 30,000 feet up, flying to some big meeting, or going to give a big speech, you somebody, and then you're thinking, I don't have a way to get out, because no one prepared me for exiting.
Right.
No one said, okay, here's what you need. You need an exit strategy.
Right.
Right. And so having an exit strategy, again, relying on your advisory board, say, guys, in case this happens, how do we exit out of this?
Right.
Well, by the time, I was feeling that pressure, we were doing international business, which is complicated. We had funds overseas, trying to figure out how to do all of that, right? We had legal issues going on in our nonprofit world, which are different than the for-profit world. I'd never done that before, had no idea. So the pressure of piling up on that, I quit hanging around with friends. I quit playing golf. I quit doing things because I just started going inward. And then you find yourself depressed and angry and compromising, lies that you shouldn't be telling to try to cover up, make yourself look better. And so, what we're trying to do here is to help you not make those kind of
Right.
mistakes, not go down that what my wife used to call the elevator to the pit. It's one floor at a time. You don't think it's moving.
slippery slope,
It's
sure.
very slow, and you wake up and you're not on the top floor.
Now see, and now my experience is different, and these are great perspectives. So, so there were indicators telling me that I should get out of business, but the hard work, and you mentioned about you were flying around the country, you were going places, you didn't have time to do this and that, or these were some of the things that you were doing, and you were being
Right.
consumed
Right.
into the business. I was consumed into the business too, and I was telling folks how I'd never spent a Thanksgiving for the first, I think, 8, 10, 12 years. I never saw Thanksgiving with my
Right.
family because one of my customers, their biggest time of the year was Christmas, and so I would always have to be in Kansas City
Right.
with my customer, and then Christmas was kind of dicey, and I traveled the country, but that was not an indicator being consumed. I was actually enjoying.
Yeah,
So see,
of course you
in
do.
this case, what we're saying is, in counting the costs and having a spouse or a friend and everyone else around who is surrounding you, when you're doing all of this and the baby is saying, "Feed me, I need attention," and you're able to give it that attention, and you're not consumed, you should
Yeah.
continue to do the things that you're doing.
Exactly.
But once it starts, when you're doing that, and then it starts robbing you,
Right.
and that's the contrast that you just gave. Once it starts robbing you, that I don't want to be, I can't be away for Thanksgiving, and you're grieving, or maybe your family is saying, "Well, how come you aren't here?" In this case, my family was saying, I don't know why they were telling me to go, but they said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead, Dad. You can leave the checkbook, fix the food, go ahead." But in any event, I didn't have that, and so people really need to realize that it is if it's creating the work, the required work, the hard work, and
That's different.
I kind of suspected that this was going to be a needed, much extended discussion. So I'm going to just tell everyone, the audience and you, Jim, join me. We're going to do a third segment
segment.
on
Okay.
this, because this is just so important, and there's so many.
So we don't
clues.
want our pain to be your pain.
Right.
That's,
I'm in the business of collision avoidance. So what we want to do is tell you that the light at the end of the tunnel is a train.
it is a light. It is coming.
Yeah, and you might get hit, but what we want to do is we want to minimize that
damage,
hit.
yeah.
We want to see if we can cause you, or as I mentioned, simulate and avoid some of these pitfalls. But there are indicators that I want us to continue to in a third segment. So we're going to do a third segment. There are indicators that people need to pay attention to. It's like a body.
Yeah.
Your body, there's
Tells
and
you.
we're going to pick this up on the next one. Your body gives you indicators that are seen, that are felt, and then there's silent indicators that you don't know of, and that's where your team and other people need to come around.
See the
and
blind
then
spots.
you need an expert to come around and say, "You need to cease operations. You need to stop." This is Glenn. I'll see you, where we're going to continue this discussion and dialogue on things that you need to know, that's telling you, stop it. Stop it. I'll see you next time. Win with Glenn.
Thank you for joining us for the Win with Glenn video podcast. Stay connected by following and subscribing to this podcast on these platforms. Join us every week as Glenn and special guests give you the tools you need to grow and have a successful business or career.